Formula One is in Abu Dhabi for their final race of the season. The Yas Marina circuit is well known for its variety, with its slower winding sections in the marina, its longer straights in Sector 2, as well as its faster corners in turns 2 and 3, where overall, passing is going to come at a premium. Tune in as Mercedes and Ferrari fight to the bell. Checo has his ups and downs, and Yuki finishes the year strong. Let's discuss. How's it going, guys? Hope you're having an awesome week. This is our last week of the Formula One season, last race, and the last video for the series getting into Formula One. It's been honestly a really cool journey, and I'll actually probably close out this video series with my overall thoughts on Formula One, as this is my first year watching Formula One. So I'm really excited to break down this weekend. We had an interesting weekend coming off of such an amazing race in Las Vegas, kind of a hectic week in Las Vegas, and they go kind of right in. I mean, they flew all the way from Las Vegas, had this crazy time change. I don't know how they do it. These athletes are crazy, but when we talk about qualifications, one of the names that definitely sticks out is Yuki Tsunoda. Ends up qualifying 6th, which is just fantastic. And really the question is he going to be able to hold that spot, or is he going to be fighting for his life? And well, we'll see here in a minute. But going into the race, it's very clear that we're not necessarily, people are aware they're not necessarily competing with Max for a win. That's kind of inevitable. In this, the real battle comes a couple places down for the second place in the Constructors' Championship, where we have Mercedes and Ferrari fighting for that second place bid, and I believe they're only a few points away from one another. So this is a very pivotal race coming down to the bitter end here. And so look for McLaren, Mercedes, and Ferrari to be contending for podiums today, but also trying to get points, running strategies so that they're beating one another, specifically Ferrari and Mercedes. Unfortunately, we see Sergio Perez and Lewis Hamilton not qualify their best. 11th and 9th, I believe, is where they started. And so look for them to be climbers today, and Hamilton's got a lot of ground to make up to ensure that Mercedes keeps that second place bid for the Constructors' Championship. But without further ado, let's get into the race. With such an eventful start to the race last week, with all the yellows and stuff, this start was a little bit of a relief. We didn't have any of these crazy yellows, virtual safety cars, and all that jazz, but we did have an element of Leclerc kind of sniffing at Max's back, and in that he tries to make two moves throughout this first lap. In the first one, he ends up getting him for a second, and then Max is able to hold it off through the corner. And the second one, he really didn't have as much of a shot, but this was kind of promising to start the race. You're like, okay, there's some action going on here, and so that was nice to see. Also, we see a couple laps later, after things kind of settle in, Max kind of pulls away a little bit, just doing his thing, nobody really bugging him. Perez ends up getting Hamilton on lap 4, and this is one of those people I'm telling us that I told you guys earlier that we have to be on the lookout for climbing. And he started off 9th, I believe, and so he's going to make his way up. And so he ends up passing Hamilton on lap 4. Norris ends up getting Piastri, and we got to be on the lookout for these McLarens. They're not in the fight for Constructors' second place or third place, unfortunately, due to their most recent showings. However, they still want to probably finish on podium, right? But Norris gets by Piastri, and now Piastri is kind of in the range of Hamilton. And so Hamilton gets by him, but Piastri is able to stay true to the corner. And so we see these higher speed corners, they're able to kind of hold their position and stay through it and end up keeping their positions oftentimes. And so he sticks it out, and this is on lap 7. And really passing around the outside is pretty difficult. And then when you pass around the inside, it's a little bit tougher to gain that position at times, unless you really got that much better of a car. But then we see Perez get Gasly as he continues his ascent. So not only did he get Hamilton, but now he got Gasly, and he gets to 8th place now. And so Hamilton finally gets around Piastri after that little squabble a couple laps prior that I just discussed, around lap 11, able to work by Piastri. And now it's time for pit stops. Around lap 15, people are going into the pits, and this is where a little bit of drama ensues. So as I mentioned, McLaren is going to be in the running, trying to get a podium. They have pretty quick cars in qualifying, and they've been fantastic in the pits. Some of the best pit times throughout the year have been McLaren pit times. And so when Lando gets into the pits, he's fighting for position with George Russell, and unfortunately they have a 5.1 second pit stop. Not very good. Russell's able to get out ahead of Lando, beats him in the pits, and that was kind of a very telling moment, as from then on we really start to see McLaren kind of fade throughout this race, not really be a true contender. Nonetheless, Hamilton ends up getting into the back of one of the Alpines, I believe it was Ocon, but has damage to his front, and it's unfortunate for Hamilton. A lot of pressure on the Mercedes guys. They take pride in this Constructors' Championship. I believe there's some funding attached to that as well, and so there is incentive to not, mess up like this. And so I believe the individual in front of him just kind of checked up going through the corner, and it just really threw Lewis for a loop. But lap 25, Perez passes Alonso. Perez is up to 6th place. You're like, holy smokes, wow. He's really got something going here. Started 9th, working his way up to 6th. Maybe he could fight for a podium spot. And then a couple laps later, lap 28, Perez ends up getting Piastri. Man, he's really working his way up. And lap 37, Hamilton, despite his contact and some of that damage that may be there, Hamilton is able to get Alonso, and then Alonso gets the position right back soon after. And I think there's some DRS advantage there, from giving up that position, but lap 46, Alonso gets Sainz into turn 5. It's kind of nice to see Alonso back in the mix at the front end of the pack, as it was kind of depressing in the middle part of that season, just seeing him 10th and below and just basically scraping by points. But just a lap later, on lap 47, we see Perez make a move on Norris, and he gets Norris on the inside, and this is where we see another little bit of contact here through this corner. He takes Norris off track, and right over the radio we see Perez on the screen say, "Oh, he turned into me, blah, blah, blah." You clearly see in the replay that Perez completely misses the apex, completely gets into Norris, and obviously drivers want to always think that they're right, but it's kind of relieving when you have a guy like Lewis Hamilton, or in the past with other drivers, that admit when they are wrong, like, yeah, I messed up there, and that's okay. I mean, you're not perfect. And so in that, we see Lando get a little bit damaged, get off track, but in the end all be all, I don't know how much it really impacted where he ended up being, but it did impact Perez. We noted how he climbed up several positions to get to this point, and then unfortunately he's tacked with a 5-second penalty due to this contact with Lando, and so that really hampers his race. And just when you think things are starting to get better for Checo, end of the season, let's end on a high note, and he just finds a way to mess it up. I kind of feel bad for him, but I kind of don't at the same time. Either way, McLarens are fading. This doesn't help, and now lap 48, we only got about 10 or so laps left. Really fighting here, as Sainz was completely off strategy, whacked out here. Leclerc kind of got the better end of this for the first time in forever, I feel like. But Hamilton gets Sainz quite easily. There's just no competition there. Then Perez tries again on Norris, is able to make the pass despite having this penalty. He gets by Lando, and Lando will end up getting up there anyway because there is that 5-second penalty. But then Perez gets Hamilton, gets up to 3rd place with only a couple laps left. This happens on lap 54, and Sergio's still going to be like, you know what? I know I got this penalty, but I'm going to do my best, show them that I can still race. Hopefully they keep me for next year. Then there's a couple of last lap shenanigans here. Max ends up winning his 19th Grand Prix of the year. Stinking crazy. But just because he's winning the race, got all this smoke going on. I can barely see the front straight. It's kind of annoying, but there's a lot of racing going on behind. We raced to the last lap. Just because Max finished doesn't mean the rest of the track isn't racing still. Hamilton gets Tsunoda on this last lap, but then Tsunoda comes back on the inside and ends up getting that place right back. And I feel like this is a really good homage to the weekend by Tsunoda, and maybe not having like the most competitive car throughout the year, but still fighting for points, and maybe had some rough stretches, but finishing strong for Yuki, and just a really great weekend all around for him. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and get into the results, and then we'll get into my overall thoughts on the race. All right, so let's throw the results up on the screen and talk about it real quick. So, as I mentioned, Max gets his 19th win. of the year. And also, there's a bunch of other crazy stats I could probably read off here. He had a phenomenal year. Props to him. Second place technically is Charles Leclerc. Sergio Perez ended up finishing second, but due to that 5-second penalty, he ends up finishing fourth. Charles Leclerc has had a really great end of the year with a very exciting car the past couple weekends, and so props to him getting back on the podium again. And so hopefully this builds into next year and Ferrari being more consistently competitive. George Russell ends up in third, and as I mentioned, Perez in fourth, Lando in fifth, Oscar in sixth. Feels like McLaren qualified well, but didn't really have the car to compete for a podium today. And Fernando Alonso getting in the points, but also maybe not where he wants to be, finishing seventh. Yuki in eighth, props to him, amazing drive, sticking it in eighth place. Lewis Hamilton in ninth. You would imagine he's very frustrated with how he finished, with George finishing third. I'm sure Lewis is frustrated, but despite this, Mercedes is still able to acquire that second place in the Constructors' Championship, and you know Lewis was asking about that over the radio, and he's a real team player there. And next we have Lance Stroll finishing out the top 10, and Daniel Ricciardo in 11th, Ocon and Gasly 12th and 13th, and Alpines and Albon, Hulkenberg, Sargent, Guan Yu, and then unfortunately we have Sainz, Bottas, and Magnussen just finishing 57 laps. But nonetheless, what are my overall thoughts on the race? I think when it comes to an end-of-the-year race, really you could ask for a couple of different things, and one of those things would be just some sort of competition, something to follow throughout the race. And in this, there was this Mercedes and Ferrari aspect to this race, which really saved the race in a way. I don't think Max had too much competition. There wasn't like an abundance of action. It's a little bit tough to pass in many parts of this track. Leclerc had this really cool strategy call where maybe it was a little bit too late when he made, a little bit too late for this idea, but had the idea of letting Checo pass him and trying to work a gap with Mercedes. And so that was kind of cool to see him, just be like, wow, he has the whereabouts while he's driving one of the fastest cars in the world to think about strategy and where other people are at in the track. It was kind of cool. And then Tsunoda with a pretty decent drive. But for me, coming off of Las Vegas, this race was kind of mid. This year was a little bit tough at times, admittedly. Very tough to follow a series that has a very frequent winner. And we'll talk about this, and I'll talk more about my opinions on F1 and all that jazz in another video. Yeah, it's been a great ride, and if you are not subscribed already, go ahead and subscribe so you can tune into that video, and I do post it on my overall thoughts on the season. But what did you guys think of the race? Go ahead and let me know in the comments section below, and go ahead and like and subscribe to support the channel and see more videos from me. Have a great week, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.